Welcome to Codex, a history of video games. I am Michael Coletta.
And I am Tyler's B. Osby the Third. That's not true. That's not my name. You said Michael Coletta, and I felt like I needed to elongate my name.
I was trying to throw it off a little bit. I think it worked.
You really threw me for a loop there. I'm Tyler Osby.
I'm so excited today because we're going to talk about. I think this game was very important to my childhood.
Really, I'm so excited to hear you talk about it.
Yeah. So you want to take it away? I'm not going to spoil it.
Yeah.
No spoilers until about 10 seconds from now.
Yeah. So and if you've seen the title of the podcast, I'm sure you've already had it spoiled. But another series that is near and dear to my heart, and apparently Mike's also, one that popularized an entire genre of games that are kind of hard to explain why they're fun. They just are fun. A game that spawned an entire series of games attempting to do what it did for other subjects to varying degrees of success. I'm talking about, of course, the SimCity series. Mike, do you have any experience with SimCity?
Okay, so I played SimCity on computer when I would go to friends' houses and they had it. But then I owned SimCity 2000 for, I'm pretty sure it was PlayStation 2. Might have been PlayStation 1.
I think it was a PlayStation 1 game, if you're talking about
Probably,
2000.
Okay. Yeah, okay. It was PlayStation 1. That's right. And I played that a lot.
Yeah.
Quite a bit. And because I wanted to figure it out and figure out how to be a successful city, and I could never do it right. So what would end up happening is my city was on the brink of going bankrupt, and then I'd just summon a monster and blow it up.
That's always the end game, is like, once you get bored with the simulation part, you're just like, well, how can I mess this up? And then
because I wanted to be successful.
Yeah.
But I'm just a terrible city manager. Although it's such a cool idea for a game.
Yeah.
It's so cool.
Yeah. So let's take a step back here and describe the game a little bit. So in short, the name of the game describes perfectly what it is. It's a simulation of a city. So you play as the mayor. I think you're kind of more like the dictator of a city.
I totally agree with you that you are the dictator.
Yeah, so it's up to you to be that city's sole planner. You plan the roads, the railroad tracks, the power structure, the water structure, and you zone the city for like different types of buildings and stuff like that. Depending on what mode you play on, it can be easier, harder, and there are natural disasters that can occur, and unnatural disasters in the case of like alien invasions or monster invasions that can totally happen in some games based on difficulty and probably which version you're playing and stuff like that. But the thing about SimCity is that there isn't really an end state where you win the game. You just sort of back yourself into a corner. So you can lose if you back yourself into a corner. If you like spend too much or money or take out too many loans, you get to a spot where you can't continue building and managing your city. And at that point, you either start a new city or you bust out the cheat codes. This game and in all of its incarnations are supremely fun to cheat in. Like, just grant yourself unlimited money and just build everything you ever wanted is so much fun.
I completely agree. I might be picking this up after this because you're already giving me so many fuzzy memories right now with this game.
So good, so good. The SimCity series also would spawn a whole bunch of sim games in the 1990s, including, but not limited to, SimCopter, Sim Theme Park, Sim Coaster, and literally, truly, a game called Sim Ant. That is exactly what it sounds like. Sim Farm,
You
too.
are an ant?
Yeah, I think you manage an ant colony.
Oh, yeah. Interesting.
So this city also spawned The Sims, one of, if not the best-selling game of all time, at least on PC. And it's a series that EA continues to put out games and expansions for. The Sims just continues going. So maybe someday we'll cover those other Sim games because I think that's a whole interesting kind of subgenre unto itself. Not all of them are good. In fact, most of them are not good, but they might still be fun to cover. But today, I just wanted to cover the great granddaddy of them all, SimCity, and the series of games that spawned directly from SimCity. So,
yeah, I think you're right. I think you got to cover SimCity before you can cover all those other ones.
Yeah. So, when we start with the history of SimCity, we got to go back a little ways, all the way back to the 80s, a time when video games were all actiony and fun with explosions and pew-pew. A little-known designer named Will Wright was working on a Commodore 64 game called Raid on the Bungling Bay. I think that's how you say that, Bungling Bay? The Raid on Bungling Bay is I think
that's how you say it.
Yeah, it was like a helicopter flying shoot 'em up game, but he found that while he was designing the maps themselves, that was actually more fun than flying the helicopter over them. He was having way more fun just building the maps. So he started expanding on that and adding in layers of simulation as he went along. So it took him about a year, but he eventually got a game together that he was pretty proud of, and he settled on a name for it. He called it not SimCity. He called it Micropolis, which is a really good name.
It's a cool name.
Yeah.
Yeah, Micropolis is really cool.
That's a really, really great name for a game like that. But he had a lot of trouble finding a publisher who was willing to fund development. It just sounded like a boring game. It was kind of hard for him to sell this game that didn't have like a definitive win state. You just kind of played until you got tired of it. So instead of finding a publisher for their game, Will Wright and Jeff Braun formed a company themselves. They called it Maxis. You may have heard of them.
I've heard of Maxis.
Yeah, they published the game themselves with the help of Broderbund's software distributing skills, and the very first SimCity was launched in 1989 on the Amiga and Macintosh platforms, and then, shortly thereafter, it was launched on the IBM PC and Commodore 64. Man, the 80s were wild for computers. There were like so many different competing and incompatible platforms. Like these days, it's just you buy a Mac or a PC.
Yeah, I mean, when we were doing this in the very beginning and we were talking about kind of the 80s and all the different, essentially like they're consoles, but they were also PCs at the same time. Like I'm talking about your ColecoVisions.
Yeah.
You know, there were so many.
Yeah.
So many more than I had ever heard of in my life.
Yeah, and SimCity would come out on nearly all of them, in fact. I will list off names of them later.
Sorry, I don't mean to do spoilers beforehand. I just thought of that as a little aside.
No, that's okay. But yeah, it's just Mac and PC these days. Although maybe you could make the argument that like, well, choosing if you buy like an Android tablet or an iOS tablet, like that's a different platform. And I guess you'd be kind of right there.
I guess. But isn't it like iOS and Mac OS? They're kind of slowly like getting the features of one another.
Yeah,
right? They're slowly becoming the same thing.
Yeah, they've been slowly making a convergence, and I don't know if they'll ever fully combine, but definitely like they have been sort of moving toward each other. But we digress here.
That's off topic. My bad.
Off topic. Initially, SimCity sold very poorly. We are not talking hotcakes and gangbusters. We're talking cold cakes and gang unifiers. I actually, you know
gang. That's hard. What would gang?
I don't know what a gangbuster is.
Gang fixer?
Gang fixers. Yeah, it sold like cold cakes and gang fixers, which is to say not well. So anyway, after it got some good reviews in the press, though, the sales picked up and eventually it became a bestseller. It did pretty well on PC platforms back in the day, but it really took off when it was released as a launch title for the Super Nintendo Entertainment System in North America in 1991.
Nice. Also, side note, I will still eat cold pancakes. I don't even care. Just to throw it out there to everyone so everyone knows it.
Same. Put syrup on them. I don't care. I will eat cold cakes. But if you had the choice between cold cakes and hot cakes, you pick the hot cakes, right?
Oh, you're going to choose hot.
Yeah.
Totally.
So it's not to say it didn't sell any copies. It just didn't sell as many as hot cakes. Right? Yeah.
Yeah. I think we nailed it.
Sure. Yeah. Got it. Okay, cool. Metaphor nailed. So Nintendo took a liking to the game, and they actually developed the port of SimCity themselves for the Super Nintendo. Initially, they had announced an NES version alongside the Super Nintendo version, but that version was eventually scrapped. They gave up on the NES version. But on a side note, recently in 2018, an unfinished cartridge containing SimCity for the NES was unearthed. That was pretty neat. There's lots of videos on YouTube now that go in depth on what the NES version contains, and it's actually really, really impressive for an NES game.
That's like national treasure, but for video games.
Yeah, it has like a whole different soundtrack. I think there was a different composer for it, and I was looking at kind of comparative screenshots between it and the Super Nintendo version, and it looks like an NES game, but it doesn't look, it looks playable. That's all I'm saying,
All right, I'm going to pitch you a movie. Okay. So it's you, Tyler. You're you, but you're acting in this movie. And your dad is Nicolas Cage. Mm-hmm. And he says for the longest time, your great-great-grandfather, don't worry about the timing, worked for Nintendo. Okay? And he started working on the SimCity for NES. And then that's your national treasure. And you spend the movie going to find it. And eventually you have to steal some sort of important Nintendo document from the Nintendo Corporation.
And then is that like a map that leads me to the NES version?
Yes, exactly. And it's written on the back of an ET cartridge that you have to find.
Oh, then I have to dig up in the landfill where they buried all those ET cartridges. Yeah.
But that's just where the movie starts. That's just the first clue. And then it goes on from there.
That's where the movie kicks off, is where I find that ET cartridge. So I've already been at this for a while before the movie starts.
Yeah. It's your life's work. It's your life's work.
Wow. And then I find that NES cartridge and we put videos on YouTube. Spoilers. That was us that put videos on YouTube.
And Sean Bean tries to kill you at one point. That's how it works.
Anyway. Sim.
I should have taken a podcast, Sim podcast, to not derail it. That's what I should have played.
So anyway, SimCity on the NES never came out, but it was pretty impressive for an NES game. But as a launch title for the Super Nintendo in North America, SimCity sold nearly an order of magnitude more copies. So where the original had sold about 300,000 copies on personal computers, which was a pretty good number for the time, especially for small indie developer Maxis Games, the Super Nintendo version sold 2 million copies. Now that's hotcakes and gangbusters.
That's impressive.
Yeah. And Nintendo's version was fun, too. It had new gameplay enhancements, like a Mario statue that when your city reached 500,000 residents. Also, one of the disasters from the original game is that, it's probably not Godzilla for copyright reasons, but basically Godzilla can come and destroy your town. You have to, fight him off. Well, in the Super Nintendo version, it's Bowser that comes to destroy your town. So that makes sense.
That's so cool.
It also had...
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, it's having Bowser, walk through your town has got to be really cool. I've never played the Super Nintendo version, but because it has Bowser in it, that makes me want to play it.
Me too.
They also had seasons in the Super Nintendo version, civic reward buildings, which are buildings you can build once you've reached certain milestones in the game. So they give you some goals to work toward. There were a couple extra scenarios and an advisor named Mr. Wright. Fun fact, Mr. Wright, this is W-R-I-G-H-T, like Will Wright. He's he gives you advice and stuff, and he's based on Will Wright, obviously. But Mr. Wright also appears in Link's Awakening, both the original Game Boy and the Switch versions, as Mr. Wright, W-R-I-T-E, so writing, pencil writing. He's a man that writes letters for you or something. I can't remember exactly what he does in Link's Awakening, but he's in there.
That's cool.
Inspired by Mr. Wright, or Dr. Wright, I think he is in SimCity, but he's Mr. Wright on Link's Awakening.
I really want to play that Link's Awakening remake. That's going to be the next Switch game I play,
yeah.
I think.
That's a great choice. It's so good.
It just looks so cute.
Yeah. You can I feel like when I play it, you can smell the plastic in a good way.
No, yeah.
Because it's in this very
I know
plasticky.
exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
To me, it smells like a brand new comic book, you know? That kind of it's paper, but it's got plastic, synthetic. Oh.
Yeah. Or when you open a new DVD case, like a game or a Blu-ray case,
Oh,
and
yeah.
you're just give that new game smell. I feel like Link's Awakening smells like that while you're playing it.
Agreed.
But we digress yet again. The Super Nintendo version of SimCity, the original, is generally considered to be the best version of classic SimCity. Classic SimCity would go on to be released on nearly every platform imaginable. I actually have a Palm Pilot here next to me that has a version of the original SimCity Classic on it. That's how prolific this game was. So real quick here, I'm just going to read off Wikipedia's list of platforms, which I don't think is comprehensive now that I look at it.
Okay, and then you have to explain why you have a Palm Pilot next to you after you read this list.
Okay, I could do that. So it was released on the Acorn Archimedes, the Acorn Electron, the Amiga, the Amstrad CPC, the Atari ST, the BBC Micro, browser. Oh, it was in the web browser, I guess. Commodore 64, CDTV, DESQ-View. Desk View? I've never heard of that. I
think it's Desk View, but I've never heard of that. Yeah.
DOS, the Epoch 32, FM Towns, iOS, Linux, macOS, mobile phone, NEWS, News, that must be a mobile phone operating system, OLPC XO-1, OS2, PC 98, Super Nintendo, TK, Unix, Windows, X11 TCL, the X68000, and the ZX Spectrum. Also, Palm Pilot apparently is not even on this list, and I definitely have that version on the Palm Pilot that is next to me. It's not a Palm Pilot, it is a Palm M125, so it's a little bit newer than the Pilot, but it is the same operating system, same kind of idea. I have it because I went to a Goodwill a couple of years ago, and they had just stacks of these things up on the shelves above, and it was only $8, and it was complete in box, brand new. So I got it because I always wanted one when I was growing up. I wanted this particular model. Well, I wanted the color version of that model, the M130, but the M125 was a pretty good substitute. So I bought it.
So right when I got out of college, I worked at a law firm. A little autobiography here, everybody. Okay. And I remember the day they tried to get one of the managing partners of this firm to ditch his Palm Pilot and get an iPhone. And he was so in love with his Palm Pilot that he actually returned the iPhone and stuck.
He was still using a Palm Pilot in 2007 or 8?
This was 2000. That's just later than that. This was 2011, 2012.
Oh my goodness. You don't happen to know off the top of your head what model of Palm
It
Pilot
wasn't. It was like because they did have like newer, and I'm using that in big quotes. Like it's a more smartphone style, but it still had the big keyboard at the bottom of it.
Okay, so it was like a Treo, probably, huh?
Yeah, but it was definitely Palm brand because he called it his Palm Pilot.
Yeah,
I think he just called it that, even though it wasn't that. The thing that people do when they don't know.
Yeah,
they just call it a thing.
Palm made Treos at the end of the Treo's lifespan, I think, because they had bought Handspring, who originally made Treo. I know way too much like random trivia about like Palm, the company.
We're gonna do Podex history of Palm Pilots after this.
I truly could do a whole episode on the history of Palm Pilots. But my favorite part about SimCity, getting back into it, is that there is an original Macintosh version of it. This was back in the day when the Mac could actually be argued that it was a superior platform for games, because in 1989, Windows was out by then, but it wasn't good. Windows wasn't good until 3.1 came out in like 1990. So for like a solid 6 years after the Mac came out in 1984, it was like the best graphic operating system. And so you could make the argument that it was the best way to play games because there were lots of cool games coming out for the Mac.
Mac's got all the games. Windows got no games.
Windows had no games. It was all DOS games back then. Windows didn't start getting games till probably 3.1, maybe 95.
So like I remember my first the true moment I remember my first family computer was like a Gateway 2000 like cow.
Oh yeah.
Print box Windows. I think it had Windows 95 on it, even though it was called Gateway 2000, which was confusing. But we had a DOS computer for a while.
Oh,
because
really?
I remember that green text.
Yeah,
like black screen, green text, and my mom would like word process in it, and it would print on the really old printer.
Yeah, the printer like shakes the whole house while it's printing because it's like
And I remember that I never used that computer, but I just remember it as like a memory. And you can get DOS computers now, right? That's like a thing.
I keep my eye on eBay every now and then for like an old 486. I think that's like kind of the sweet spot of like old, but like not so old that you couldn't actually do something fun with it. Like something that can play Doom, but like struggles a little bit with it,
All it does is if it can play Doom, that's all we care about on this podcast, everyone.
I really want to get like an old 486. So I keep my eye on eBay for that every now and then.
Got to keep your eye on it.
Yeah. Anyway, back to SimCity. Excuse me. The game itself, the original SimCity, was greatly received by critics. It got so many Game of the Year awards that it's like, I don't even want to list them all here because we'd just be here all day. This would be Goaty Deck's History of Game of the Year for SimCity. That's what we would be if I did that.
I like that though. Goaty Decks. I'm into
Goaty Decks. It spawned not just a genre of simulation games, but an entire category of games Wikipedia calls software toys, or games that don't really have a set goal. They just provide the player with toys to play with. I think that's really neat. Like that's a cool.
Would you call it like sandbox? Would that be a term that you'd throw around or no?
Yeah, sandbox is a pretty good term for that now. Like they weren't calling them that back in the day, but I think that's a pretty good and accurate description. Yeah, sandbox games where it's just like, here are the tools, do something with it, make your own goals, or don't. I'm not your mom. I'm not going to tell you what to do.
Tyler's not your mom. He's Tyler. Stop being weird.
But I remember that schools also loved SimCity because it was one of those like learning disguised as a game things. There's so many like cause and effect relationships in SimCity, and it requires a lot of critical thinking and foresight to plan a good city. And those are good skills for kids to develop. So it's like cool to be like, hey, if we put this like power plant here, how is that going to affect the things that pop up around it and stuff like that? And like you really have to be able to think ahead. And I think that's like really clutch for like elementary school kids, if you ask me.
I totally agree with you. That's great.
Yeah. I don't have a whole lot of experience with the original SimCity outside of the Palm version I mentioned, which I really don't have very much experience with at all. But I do have a lot of experience with the next game in this series. Before we move on to that, though, do you have any experience with the original SimCity?
I never played the original. I just jumped in at SimCity 2000. As far as I know, who knows? As a little kid, maybe I played it, but I only really remember playing SimCity 2000.
Yeah, that's where I come in too. So SimCity 2000. Do you remember in the early 90s when everything was like something 2000 to like seem futuristic?
Gateway 2000?
Yeah, like you were just, yeah. Oh man, those were good times. And now if you see something that's like labeled as 2000, it just feels old and outdated. It's like 80s future,
Do you think they're going to do that in like 2090?
Oh,
they're going to start calling things like 3000
or 2100. Yeah, and then things started being called 3000,
good
like
point.
SimCity 3000.
It wouldn't be 3,000. It would be 2,100.
In the year
Just gonna-
2999, they're going to start calling things 3000.
I'm going to call it.
Those are good times when that's all you needed to be futuristic was to name your thing something 2000. Anyway, the original SimCity was so popular and so well received that obviously it needed a sequel, especially since some of those other spin-off games like Sim Earth, Sim Ant, Sim Farm, Sim Life, they didn't really do very well.
Wait, those were after SimCity original?
Yeah.
Oh,
like-
I thought they were after 2000 for some reason.
They were kind of all, like there were a few that came out in between, but like the first one and then SimCity 2000, because 2000 came out in, I want to say 94? I can't remember.
Man, that's earlier than I thought. It's way earlier than I thought.
1993 is when 2000 came out, and those other games, as far as I know, came out actually before 2000, which is crazy. But it's
It
because
had a cool soundtrack, if I remember correctly.
it had a really cool like MIDI synthesized soundtrack. Yeah. You just look up a YouTube video of the SimCity 2000 soundtrack and like just nostalgia for days.
And then just chill.
Yeah, just hang out because it was really good chill music. Later SimCities would get even better chill music, if you ask me. Like we start to get into like some almost like proto lo-fi hip hop beats to study and relax to.
Oh, I still listen to that channel.
Yeah,
Love
me
it.
too. So SimCity 2000 was a huge upgrade over the original. Honestly, if they kept the exact same game as the original and just upgraded the graphics though to SimCity 2000 levels, it would have totally been worth it. But SimCity 2000 goes far beyond that. But let's start with those graphics though. This is an audio podcast, so I can't show you screenshots, but they just trust me, they're so much better. It's an isometric viewpoint now instead of top down, and everything is in higher resolution. It just looks so much better. Like there's no contest. You look at.
I remember it looking good, even when I was playing it like well after its time.
Yeah, it still looks pretty good. It's like it's of that era where like pixel art had gotten really, really high quality, but we weren't into the polygon era yet. So it's just like really high quality pixel art that still sort of holds up pretty well today, you know, even if it's lower resolution, it still holds up just from a stylistic point. But
I love it.
They added so many new building types. So I'm going to list these from Wikipedia. Prisons, schools, libraries, museums, marinas, zoos, stadiums, hospitals, and churches, and arcologies. Roads were way better. You could build highways now. You could have a public transportation system, tons of other stuff. You could put in railroads. The list just goes on and on and on of the things they added. Those things are so key to SimCity 2000 that I'm like surprised they weren't in the original. You know?
Yeah, I didn't even know they weren't in the original.
Yeah.
So
while the original SimCity was probably super great, 2000 just went above and beyond to create the game as we know it today. I think the theme of enhancements over SimCity Classic can be summed up in one word: detail. Taxes were more detailed, which is not exciting, but very exciting in the context of SimCity. So taxes were more detailed. Roads were more detailed. Railroads were more detailed. Even power lines and power plants were more detailed. Not just graphically, though they looked way better, but their simulations were deeper and more detailed too. And I think they just really knocked it out of the park with SimCity 2000, if you ask me.
I agree with you. I totally agree with you.
Yeah. You also receive news about your city now in the form of newspapers. Remember the newspapers that would pop up?
I loved it.
Yeah.
If you did something good, you didn't even know it.
Yeah. So they would have these like sort of semi-randomly generated news stories about your town. Some of it was useful, like telling you what your Sims want. That's what the people of SimCity are called. They're called Sims. So it'll tell you like what they want. Some of them were just funny articles about the weird stuff that's happening in your town, and they were like kind of semi-randomly generated, I think. So like there was some hilarity that happened there just because the nature of being randomly generated can kind of make things hilarious and unintentionally. So like any good sim game, though, there's no real ending to it, but there is a sort of victory condition if you want to like work towards it. There is a thing. I didn't know about this until I read about it. It's called the Exodus. You know how to achieve the Exodus?
I have no idea. I've never heard of this before.
So after the year 2051 in-game, if a player builds a total of 300 launch arcologies are like these self-contained living spaces that hold just tons of Sims. Those arcologies will start blasting off into space.
What?
Yeah. So this lowers your city's population, obviously, because people are literally leaving the planet. But then it also frees up those tiles for other uses if you want. Plus, you get the money back that you spent on the arcology. So that's pretty cool. So like the end state is all of your arcologies or your launch arcologies have gone off into space. You have all this new space to build more stuff and tons of money to build that stuff in too, because you just got all the money back from your arcology. So that's like kind of a victory condition you can go for if you're looking for like a victory thing, you know? So
definitely, I am.
It makes me want to play.
Oh man, I gotta say that to the end. I have a good in conclusion for this. I feel like that I want to talk about.
I'm excited to hear it.
I didn't know about those arcologies thing though. I had no idea.
Yeah, I didn't know about it.
Blew my mind.
I knew about arcologies, but I didn't know about the launch arcologies thing where they would launch into space and like sort of allow you to kind of declare victory over SimCity. That's crazy.
2051. That's the year. We're all blasting off into space. Everybody, it could still happen.
Yep. I hope so. They launched a scenario expansion pack, but the coolest thing that they added later to SimCity 2000 was the Urban Renewal Kit, which allowed players to create their own tile sets and buildings for use in their cities. So how cool is that?
So cool.
So cool. So SimCity 2000 also launched on like a million different computers and devices. Not quite as many as the original, but like still a lot. So I'm going to read these off from Wikipedia again.
I'm ready. I love this. I love these lists.
Yeah. Mac OS, MS-DOS, Super Nintendo, Sega Saturn, PlayStation, Nintendo 64, Game Boy Advance, also Windows 95 for the special edition, and probably more than just that, but those are the ones that are listed on Wikipedia. So not quite as many as the first time, but, you know, by the 90s, we'd kind of weeded out a lot of those random, like, Buster PC systems.
It's true. Like, it was no longer the Wild West of PCs.
So the PlayStation version let you drive your car around in your city, which is kind of similar to the PC game Streets of SimCity, which came out a little bit after SimCity 2000, which let you, like, drive around and do missions in your city. It was not a good game, though. Which, like, that was the coolest thing it had going for it, was you could load your city from SimCity 2000 into it and drive around in it, but otherwise it wasn't very fun. But...
yeah, that's a bummer.
But you could do it in the PlayStation version, so like I guess that was kind of a cool feature.
I don't even know if I did that and if I knew I had that ability in my game, just so you know.
Oh, well. you have to go back and try it out. There was
find that disc.
That's right. There was also an N64 version released in Japan only, which featured some additional features. So listed from Wikipedia, because I'm not going to play a Japanese version of a SimCity 2000 on Nintendo 64, but it was mainly mini games, a dating game, a TV to replace the newspaper, horse races, and monster breeding.
Classic.
There was some other stuff going on there too. All of that stuff was in 3D. They included a few new natural disasters, most of them being different kinds of giant monster attacks. But see, so the monster breeding makes sense here because you can actually use your monster that you did in monster breeding to fight against the monsters that are attacking your city. So it all makes sense.
Leave it to Nintendo to make the monsters in SimCity just become Pokemon. Okay, that's all they're doing.
So there was also SimCity 64, which is separate from SimCity 2000 on the Nintendo 64. That one was also only released in Japan on the 64 disk drive system. It's basically the same as SimCity 2000, but it had full 3D graphics, which was pretty neato for the time. Too bad it's only in Japan, only on the 64 DD. So like you really gotta have a very specific list of eccentric items to be able to play this one.
Oh.
Ironically, there's a twist on the original SimCity success because the original SimCity was very successful on the Super Nintendo. The Super Nintendo version of SimCity 2000 is widely considered to be the worst version of the game. Like they severely stripped it down to meet the power of like the Super Nintendo. So it's like, while the original SimCity, best version, Super Nintendo version, SimCity 2000, Super Nintendo version, worst version.
Oh.
Yeah, which is a bummer. It also came out on the Game Boy Advance, also a weak version, probably similar to the Super Nintendo version, if I had to take a guess. My favorite port of SimCity 2000, that it was not listed in that Wikipedia list, is the port for Pocket PCs. So we're welcome to Podex, A History of Palm Pilots.
Yeah, right.
I also had one of these. So Pocket PC was a platform that Microsoft had launched in the like early 2000s, the precursor to Windows Mobile. Remember that, when that was like an actual competitor to the iPhone?
Yeah,
those are some.
My mom had a Windows phone.
Yeah, those are some pretty cool phones. They were competitive, I thought, but
yeah,
like the precursor to that, like in the early 2000s, was Pocket PC, and I think they called it Windows Mobile maybe later on. but the port of SimCity for the Pocket PCs was the whole game, but just portable on like a Palm Pilot size thing. And Pocket PCs weren't great, but there were some like neat games for them. And I actually spent a lot of time playing SimCity 2000 on my Dell Axim X5 that I got in 2003. So
also, Pocket PC is a really cool name. They should bring that back. If I were Microsoft, I'd bring that back.
Me too. It was pretty cool. It was like definitely the coolest sort of Palm Pilot style device that I owned. It played MP3s, which was like really cool in the early 2000s. So I listened to a lot of Linkin Park on that.
That came on the radio the other day, and I was just like Meteora, and I'm like, man, this was high school right here. Well, there it is.
That is a great album. Overall, SimCity 2000 got great reviews, sold a lot of copies across all of those systems. They had sort of recaptured that magic of the original SimCity and carried it through to a wonderful successor in SimCity 2000. It's just chef's kiss. Perfect. But they couldn't stop there, of course. They had to release another one. And spoilers, it's also great. So...
Oh, that's a good spoiler. I always think we're doing terrifying spoilers on this podcast. We always do nice spoilers on this podcast.
SimCity 3000. So this is how you know it's further future is when it's 3000. So SimCity 3000 had a little bit of a fraught development cycle. So in 1996, Maxis planned to make a full 3D SimCity title. The developers that were working on that game, like the actual people working on it, tried to tell management that it just wasn't possible with the technology at the time. Like SimCopter was fully 3D and could sort of render a SimCity for players to like look at like close up. But if you tried to zoom out and show the whole city plus all the simulation stuff going on there, they were like, we just can't do it. It just can't be done with current
it's impossible.
Hardware. Yeah.
Are you crazy?
That's right. So management pushed super hard for it. And at E3 in 1997, they showed off what they had to the public. Now, I'm not exactly sure what happened here, but it has been described in multiple places that I looked it up as a total embarrassment. It was basically like I found the YouTube video of like the trailer they showed there, and it's basically just like one screenshot of the game with all kinds of like weird zooming and movement effects placed over it to make it look like a trailer. And it's like super realistic 3D graphics, and it's like just a screenshot like sort of moving. It's like it's really weird and obviously not very impressive. It looked bad, and the team felt bad. So in 1997, when Electronic Arts decided to purchase Maxis, they promptly canceled the 3D SimCity game, and they were like, just make a new one, but, better. So they kept it 2D, they enhanced the graphics, they added a ton of new features to the game, and SimCity 3000 was released in February of 1999, and it was pretty great. It shipped 1 million copies in its first 6 months. That's not too shabby. It placed second overall for the year in terms of sales in the US. I think these are PC game sales, because it was outpaced by Roller Coaster Tycoon, which is another.
Oh man,
yeah, that's another game like sort of in the same like vein as SimCity, right? That's another awesome.
Another episode.
Yeah, it really is. Great simulation game. We should probably cover that at some point for sure. So I don't know. I don't think it's really worth it to go into like detail on everything that SimCity 3000 changed from 2000, but suffice it to say that everything was given even more detail than the previous game. So the simulation is just so much more detailed. But in 2000. Maxis released SimCity 3000 Unlimited, a sort of expanded version of the game that added a bunch of new tile sets for buildings, so like themes basically for buildings, as well as a couple new disasters and an upgraded building architect tool for designing your own buildings. That was the version that I played. I played a lot of SimCity 3000 Unlimited. Like I played a lot of 2000 when I got it on our first PC that we bought in like 1997, Windows 95 PC, and then I played a lot of 3000 when that came out. I probably played more 3000 than 2000, but yeah, that one is very fun. Did you ever play 3000?
I don't know if I did. I'm trying to rack my brain here. I don't think I played it.
Yeah, I think for me that's the best version of the game, just because it's the one I spent the most time with and the one I'm most familiar with. So I just love it,
Yeah. That
one also came out on the DS as SimCity DS, which was pretty neat. You could like use the stylus to interact with the city. It was like kind of cool. I guess that was like, it was as cool as you could expect from a DS version of the game, probably. It also came out on iPhone in 2008. This is a version that I remember playing quite a bit because I had an original iPhone, which was not a good phone, but I loved it. And I played it a lot. I remember on the original iPhone, the game was so intense on the processor that even if you were plugged in while you were playing it, the game, your phone would still lose battery power as you played the game.
That's amazing.
That's how intense this game was. I didn't even know how that was possible, but it was when you're playing SimCity on your iPhone back in the day. So that was good times. Eventually, EA removed it from the App Store in 2011. I think that it sort of became incompatible with newer versions of iPhone OS, and they were just like, it's not worth it anymore, which is too bad because I really enjoyed that. It was definitely like a really, really cool version of SimCity 3000.
Yeah, and they could do like an artistic style to make it so it could run better, like not graphically as intensive, but I wonder if it's all the stuff running in the background of the actual simulation.
Yeah, it was probably that
processor burn.
Yeah. But they just decided in 2011, like, that rather than update the game to keep it running on newer phones, they were just like, we'll just pull it out. Which is
also, if it came back now, it would just be full of microtransactions and unplayable if it came out on phones.
It is. There is a SimCity version, SimCity Build It.
What? Oh,
it's not that. It's not SimCity, though. It doesn't simulate anything. It's one of those, like, free to wait games, where you, like, set up things and then you log back in and you tap on it to get all your resources so you can build new stuff. And it's like, it's not the same thing. It's just Simpsons tapped out, but SimCity themed.
That's not as fun.
Yeah. I did play it for a little bit though, because I really wanted it.
I mean, I played a Jurassic Park game that was a lot like that. So don't even worry about it.
Those games are fun, but they're like, you just have to know what you're getting into. They wear on you. And like at a certain point, you realize that it's designed solely to just extract money from you. And that's when I get turned off. Like, I never spend money on those games and I just can't do it. You know what I mean? Because I know the game is balanced around it.
Which is funny because if they made a SimCity that was truly SimCity and it was like $10 on iPhone, but it was the game, I would buy it.
Same. Me too. Dude, I might even pay $20 for like straight up SimCity 3000 Unlimited on iPad. I'd probably pay $20 for that.
Oh yeah, I'd pay more money for that. You're right. They sell Final Fantasy for like $10, which is super cheap to me on a phone.
Yeah, they sell a lot of Final Fantasy games. I think you can buy like 9 for, I think 9 is $20, but even then, that's still like not a bad deal for the amount of content.
Real cheap.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's my favorite SimCity, and that's probably just because it's the one I spent the most time with. But yeah, super fun. Love 3000. But this is EA we're talking about, so we're not done yet.
Electronic Arts.
There's still one more game in the series I want to discuss, and that's SimCity 4, released on macOS 10 and Windows in 2003. So SimCity 4 is kind of the last of the like true SimCity games, I think, because the new one that came out in 2013 like had so many problems that it's like not really
they were really pushing that game. I remember that.
Yeah,
SimCity.
And it was like, it's a single player game that you had to be online to play it, and they like tried to justify it by being like, oh well, the simulation is so intense that we actually do it on our cloud service, that's why you have to be online. And then like some hacker group made a patch for it that didn't require it to be online, and EA was like, well, okay. I think eventually they made it. They patched out some of that stuff, but I don't know. I never played it.
Also, I was reading because I actually was like looking at that when you told me you were going to do this. Because spoilers, Tyler and I talk about the podcast before we do it. No way. And I looked at that because I was kind of on board the hype machine when the new SimCity came out, and I was like watching videos on it a lot. I never paid for it, and I'm really glad I didn't, because if you look at it now, there's just like no one playing it, I think. And there's no multiplayer, so there's no point. It's just like a thing, And also, you can't get it on Steam. You have to get it on like EA's thing.
I think you have to get it on Origin. It's just not overall not a great experience.
It doesn't look great.
I will have a recommendation towards the end if you are craving that SimCity feeling, though.
I'm craving it.
But anyway, SimCity 4 placed a big emphasis on the connections between cities, which I think is a neat like sort of theme to go with. So in SimCity 3000, one of the new features from 2000 was you could create roads and connections to other cities, and you could trade things like electricity, water, and waste management. So you could either buy electricity or any of that stuff from another city, or you could sell it to another city, which is like kind of cool and neat that they had that in. But SimCity 4 takes that one step further and actually allows you to run those other cities, giving the player an entire region to play in and build cities, which is kind of neat. It kind of reminds me of, how like in The Sims, you could play, you played at the house, whatever house you wanted to, but then you could also kind of see the neighborhood, right? And you could like play in different houses in the neighborhood. Kind of reminded me of that, but for SimCity. So it was like playing the neighborhood of cities in SimCity.
I like that.
So
that's cool.
Yeah.
But you only ran one city though, right?
At a time, but you could run the other ones. You could like click in and do the other ones if you wanted to as well.
Oh.
Yeah. And I don't know how the interaction worked between them. Like, I think like, I don't know how, like time wise, if you only focused on one city, if that was a problem or not. But
they did that in the new SimCity. That was the thing that came out with that new one.
Yeah, and
in
I think
2012.
I think the idea there was that you would play with actual other people. So like it would be a town run by someone else, right?
Oh, I didn't
think
know that.
that was the multiplayer component of SimCity 2013. Yeah, anyway, SimCity 4 has a fully 3D engine, but parts of it are still 2D for performance reasons. It's a really good looking game. Like, it just has a cool art style. It's like high quality. I think it still holds up pretty well today, even almost 20 years later. They added a whole bunch of new features. They made the simulation even more deep, of course. One of the larger new systems they added was a traffic system for making sure that your Sims could get around effectively. They expanded on that in the only expansion for SimCity 4 called Rush Hour. And you could like drive a car around your city and stuff like that. Not Streets of SimCity style. I think it was still top-down view of driving your car around. But it like has a cool like traffic simulation. So the game was really well received. Got a lot of 8s out of 10 from different review outlets. The biggest criticism of the game, which doesn't matter today, but it was how much power it required from the computers of the day. It was like had really high system requirements because of, I guess, all the simulations happening in the background. And not everybody's computer could handle it back in the day, but it still sold pretty well, although I couldn't really find specific numbers on how well it did. So yeah, I think SimCity 4 is kind of the last of the SimCities that fans think is good. I say in quotes generally. There was a game called SimCity Societies that came out in 2007, which changed the game up a lot, so much that it wasn't really SimCity anymore. It was like really more focused on like the social aspect of the game. And then there was, of course, that SimCity reboot we were talking about that EA released in 2013. It's just called SimCity. And yeah, we kind of covered that. Like, it's just tons of complaints and like people just generally didn't like it. You couldn't make very large cities either, I think. Like, it was definitely a downgrade on the city size thing. So, I mean, that could be another episode. Like, if we wanted to do an episode on like spectacular failures or something like that, I think we could throw SimCity 2013 in there.
Then we could do some really big clickbait titles on our podcast, like 10 worst games of all time.
Yeah, and then there'll be a podcast thumbnail of like us like yelling at the camera, you know? You know what I'm talking
a couple
about.
of fire emojis everywhere.
Yeah,
That'd be great.
Little spicy thingies. Yeah, for sure. So if you're trying to play these older SimCity games, the best way to play any of them, except for Classic, is through goodoldgames.com. And this isn't, I'm not advertising for them, but if they wanted to make a deal, they should give us a call, because we are open.
Give us your money. Give us your money. Games.
But this is not a paid advertisement. I just think it's a great site. So they sell a lot of old games repackaged to play on modern PCs. So they have SimCity 2000 Special Edition. I think it's like $5 or $6. They have 3000 Unlimited for like $10, I think. And then the Deluxe Edition, so with the expansion pack for SimCity 4 with Rush Hour. I think it's like $20 for that, which is a little steep for a game that's almost 20 years old, if you ask me. But there's a lot of content there, a lot of game time there. And we were just talking about Final Fantasy IX being worth $20, so I guess that's older. But yeah, I think that the lasting legacy of these games is undebatable. Like, they did so much for the entire sim genre. Like, they basically invented it. I mean, there were simulation games before SimCity, but like they pretty much popularized it and invented it in the way that we know it today. Even if a lot of those sim games ended up being kind of bad, I think the most notable thing to come out of it is The Sims, which is the most popular PC game of all time. Just straight up, The Sims is like has sold just so much more than anything else. But if you're looking to play a really great city simulator, though, these days, and you want something that's modern and came out within the last few years, there's a game called Cities Skylines, which I think they have an expansion out, maybe a couple by now. I highly recommend checking that game out. It's really like what SimCity 2013 should have been, if you ask me.
I was looking up SimCity on Steam while we were doing this episode, just perusing to see if it was available on here before I saw your good old games thing, and Cities Skylines popped up, and it has very positive reviews, like recent reviews, very positive, over 3,000 on Steam. I'm tempted to get this game.
It's
very
fantastic.
tempted. It's also on sale right now for the next 11 hours. It's on sale. It's $7.49.
What a deal. That's a steal.
Yeah, I know, right? That's such a steal. Oh, man.
Yeah. So anyway, that's all I got for SimCity this week. Mike, what you been playing?
Oh, boy. So I've been picking up games and putting them down. I've been having a weird week. I have a hard time committing. I wanted to work on the last week I mentioned working on the Outer Worlds some more, and I picked it up and I beat a main quest chapter, and then I was just kind of like hit a part where the combat was really crazy and it clearly wants me to go level up. And I'm like, I just don't want to go grind that right now. I want to push through this story. And Borderlands 3 is the same way. I've been playing a lot of Apex recently. That's what I'm all about. Mm-hmm. But you've inspired me, I think, because there's a sim game that I like. I don't think it's for everyone. Okay? I'm going to say that right now. This is just a game I enjoy. And it's not really a hot take, even though I'm treating it like one. But Jurassic World Evolution is free on Xbox, or was free, and I picked it up when it was a game with gold or whatever, and I actually really enjoyed that game, and it's like a simulation game, and I'm going to re-download it, I think, as like a fun little... I almost beat it, and I just stopped playing it because I got my Switch, and I was obsessed with Zelda, but now I'm like, I might pick it up again, you know?
Yeah.
So there you go. It's a fun simulation game where you breed dinosaurs, and they escape, and they murder people in your park, so what's not to love?
Oh, man, that sounds like the perfect simulation game.
What you been playing though?
Well, I finished Final Fantasy VII Remake. I think I mentioned last week that I was very frustrated by the final boss fight. So of course, after putting it down and not playing it for a day, I came back the next night and beat it all first try. Easy, super easy.
Yeah.
I bashed my head against that fight for so long, and then
Classic video games.
Yep, I just walked right in, no problem. Just beat it. So that was good. I'm excited. I kind of like what they're doing with the storyline. They're doing they're like sort of probably at least opening the door to them taking it in a little bit different direction from the original, which I'm totally okay with because, you know, if I wanted to play the original, I just play the original. They're doing kind of do you remember the Star Trek 2009 movie? I can't remember if I talked about this last week.
Yeah, I remember that.
But remember how they sort of broke off from the main timeline of Star Trek, but they didn't just say oh, that stuff that happened on the original series, that never happened. They just sort of were like, no, we're just doing a different timeline, right? They're kind of doing a similar thing with Final Fantasy VII, so the things that happen in the original game are they also affect. I don't know, they sort of have just barely touched on it, so I hope that's not too spoilery. But yeah.
I don't think so.
They sort of open the door to tell their own story, and I don't think it's too much of a spoiler to say it, to put it that way, but yeah, so that was fun. Been playing some Gears 5 with you. I think we have 2 chapters left until we're done with the whole Gears series.
And then we're going to pick up some Halo, I think, and play co-op of that.
Yeah, I would love to play some co-op Halo.
Some Reach.
Other than that, I don't think I've been playing too much else.
Yeah, man, I've been trying to be productive during this whole thing. Going a little stir crazy like everyone is, and I'm trying to. I just logged into Code Academy today for the first time. I'm gonna try to learn some just for funsies, see if I enjoy it. So it's free, and I'm like, might as well give it a go and just see if I can learn some stuff.
Yeah,
why not?
Yeah, that's great.
Who knew? After 10 years of no longer being in school, I just want more school. Who knew that?
I know. Sometimes I think man, if I went back to college, I would totally crush my classes because I would be disciplined and study and take notes and stuff. And I don't know if that's true, but I do believe it in my heart that I'm like, yeah, I would totally crush it if I went back. You know?
I had a teacher in high school, a chemistry teacher, and people would be like, what would you do if you just had like $1 bazillion or whatever? And he was like, I'd just go back to school. He's like, I'd just be a full-time student. I would just go learn. I would just pick up a major and learn it and then move on to the next major. I just love school. And I didn't really get it at the time. And now as an adult, I'm like, oh yeah, school is pretty rad when you think about it. It's kind of dope.
Yeah, I'm like, I wouldn't mind doing that either because it would give you something to work towards. It would have you there's always something down the road to look forward to. If you fail, the only person who's let down is you, right? You're not actually responsible in that sense. So man, I guess I could go back to school if I wanted to, but I do look back and I'm like, man, I could have done so much better if I just cared more,
Yeah, that's what I think about too. But you can't. It's not like you can regret anything back then.
You can't. Of course not.
I don't know why we became a self-help podcast all of a sudden, but it feels fine. But yeah, so I'm looking forward to playing some more games though. I have some games. Okay, here we go. You ready, listeners? We're gonna do. So I have a couple games I bought on my Switch. All right, but My significant other has gotten so into Animal Crossing that I never play my Switch anymore. But I'm totally fine with that because they're really enjoying Animal Crossing. It is totally okay. So I do have more games to play. I just haven't gotten around to playing them yet. And so I just got to find other things. There's so many games out there. I'm never going to run out.
Yeah.
But we have an email.
I do have one more game that I've been playing. I put a few hours into Mass Effect. I started a new file.
Nice.
I'm playing on PC now. I was playing on Xbox 360 before. I decided I don't want to play at like 20 frames per second for 90 hours of my life. So I picked them back up on PC, and I'm about like 3.5 hours into the first game, and I'm having a lot of fun with that. Okay, we have reviews.
We got
emails.
We don't have any new reviews this week, but if you want to review us, you can go on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you listen and review us. It'd be very nice of you. We do have an email from Chris. And it opens up with, "What's up, guys? It's your boy Chris here again." And then he has a GIF from like a ghost hunting show, and it goes, "Hey there, demons! It's me, your boy." I think it's great. Chris says, "Really enjoyed the Animal Crossing episode you guys did this week. To be honest, I don't think I was aware of so many games in the series." You know what? Me neither, Chris. I had no idea when I started that. Don't really have any new suggestions yet for you guys to cover, but I thought giving you guys some random questions to answer would be fun to hear. Oh, here we go. Tyler, you ready for random questions?
Sure am.
Out of all the characters in every Super Smash Brothers game, who is your favorite to play and why?
Luigi, specifically from Smash Brothers 64, because if you hit his up B just right on another character, they like catch on fire, and it makes the noise that like when you nail the home run bat swing, you know? Makes that noise.
Nice.
It's super fun. It doesn't happen as much in later games. Like it's guaranteed to happen, I think, in N64 when it's just like a chance of it happening in later games. So anyway, that's me, Luigi.
In the 64 Smash Brothers, I also really like to play Ness because if you hit his up B move just right, where you hit yourself and like it's like your third jump.
Yeah.
But if you do it right and you save yourself, but also hit someone, it feels so satisfying.
Yeah, I agree.
So the second question is, who is your favorite character in Marvel or DC and why? And his just parentheses, and Marvel is better though, and that's a very hot take.
Wow.
That is a hot take. That's the hottest take that's been happening on this podcast.
Yeah. My favorite
that's
character.
Really hard to answer. It's so hard for me to answer. I have a couple that I can name. I can't broaden it down though. Can I give you? It's mostly like runs of books that I read.
Oh, okay.
It's Iron Fist, the Immortal Iron Fist series that came out. I think it was Brubaker and another. Oh my gosh, I feel so bad forgetting the guy's name. But it was they did the first book. I say book as in trades because I bought the trade paperbacks. That was really good. I really love Moon Knight, and I really love the Sentry.
I don't know the
well.
Sentry.
You know the Sentry? It's just like this interesting, like weird bending fiction kind of thing in Marvel comic books. I have the hardcover for it. It's great. And then if I had to go DC characters, I would probably actually, oh my God, it was just there. I really love Swamp Thing. Big fan of Swamp Thing. Love those Alan Moore Swamp Things. Mm-hmm. And then the other, oh my gosh, he was, you know what, you go, because I'm going to think of this other DC character real quick in my head. I just had it and it was gone.
So this is not a spicy take. My favorite Marvel character is Spider-Man. Peter, I'm torn between Peter Parker and Miles. I like the incarnations of Spider-Man where he is either in high school or like a young adult. Like the more current stuff that I've read from a couple of years ago of like Peter Parker, where he's like the head of Parker Industries and he's like basically Tony Stark. I'm not as into that. So during that period of time, I'm a much bigger Miles fan. But Spider-Man. And then in DC, I love Batman because he's just great. I mean, unless we're talking like, if I can say Watchmen, just in general, that's my favorite comic of all time. But I don't consider myself like a comic connoisseur, so I don't know a lot of really deep characters. One of my favorite Marvel characters is Silk. I really love Silk. She's like a...
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, she's like a spider person. I forget exactly how she gets her powers. I think she's the one that's bit by the same spider that bit Peter, I think.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, she's great. I love Silk. And I think they're making a movie.
I remember my two two DC characters. Well, actually, there was three because obviously everyone loves Batman.
Of
That's
course.
just a given.
Yeah.
I actually really like when they do Superman really well. And I feel like I have to say it that way
Yeah.
because like, and it's weird. I don't know if it counts because I love Superman Red Sun that, they call them Elsewhere or Offworlds. What do they call
Elseworlds?
Elseworlds? Yeah. I combined it together. I said Elsewhere and Offworlds, and it was Elseworlds. But I really like that. But my other character I really love this DC is I love Constantine, John Constantine.
Oh.
Have you read those books? Some of the
No,
books,
I haven't.
they're really good.
I remember the movie
it's-
with Keanu Reeves. I think it was
Yeah,
Keanu
the
Reeves.
movie I wasn't that bad, actually. I actually enjoyed the movie for what it was, but the books are really, really good. And I just always recommend that to people as like some if you want to get some weird demon stuff going on.
Yeah,
But still be in the DC canon, technically.
I've been meaning
Go
to
for
read
that.
Red Sun. I have a copy of it. I just haven't read it.
Yeah, I got it. It's great. It's so good. Okay, so we got to go through these questions. Third question, game design inspiration. Over the last several months, I've been teaching myself video game programming with Unity, as I've made some small, albeit incomplete games in the past on such simpler game maker software and realized it's a fun hobby. However, it's been really difficult trying to come up with a type of game I want to build. I'm curious for your input as to what kind of stuff, parentheses, genre, features, games, elements, etc., you guys would like to see more often in games, or if you could just have any other game ideas in general. I think Tyler and I talked about this already, but active reload. Why is that not in more shooters?
I love Active Reload.
Big fan of active reload. Big fan of just like really good co-op.
Yeah.
You know, like truly good co-op. We're not going to talk about it on the show because it's not history yet. Maybe we'll talk about it down the road. But there's some problems with Gears 5 that Tyler and I
agree.
noticed.
Yeah, open world
And-
mainly is the problem.
Yeah, it just feels really weird. And I just want people to focus more on the co-op. But I'm trying to think of like other fun stuff. I like it, and I don't know if this is like a common thing. It should be a common thing. But when a game does a really good job of introducing a new mechanic and then teaching you that new mechanic, but then when they have you use that mechanic, it's in slightly different ways to make you feel like you're super smart by figuring it out.
Yeah, I think the game that does that perfectly is the Portal series.
Yes.
They always will like introduce a new concept to you. They say like, so they'll like, and they don't really tell you about it. They just put it in front of you and they say, okay, here's the concept. And then they'll show you like, and here's like kind of a slightly cooler way you can use that concept. And then they'll do like maybe a third one where they're like, here's a little bit different. You kind of had to think about it a little bit. And then after that, it'll be like, okay, you know this concept now. In a couple levels, it's going to come up again, and you're going to have to like really bend your brain to remember to use this thing. I just think
I really love the way they use momentum in falling into portals and like shooting yourself across maps. That's so cool.
Yeah.
All right, you have any other features? I kind of did all
no,
those.
I think you kind of nailed it.
Okay. 4. What is the most regretful trade or sale you made to either a friend or game retailer? This is Chris. I personally remember taking the heart-wrenching mistake of selling my GameCube, Paper Mario, Thousand Year Door, Mario Kart Double Dash, Pokemon Coliseum, Sonic Riders, Sonic Mega Collection, and all my controllers, and probably a couple other games, to GameStop years ago for somewhere around a mere $80 to $100 total.
Oh,
Only
no.
to use that money immediately on a used Xbox 360 and like 1 or 2 games. I had no idea of the true value of my trade at the time, and I dearly miss my GameCube and games today, although thankfully I was smart enough to hang onto my copy of Super Smash Bros. Melee and Metroid Prime, and my amazing wife recently bought me Paper Mario Thousand Year Door. I've been playing that game like hotcakes and reliving my childhood. That's a great story. I'm glad it has a happy ending. I have 2 regretful trades. You ready?
Yeah.
1, I regret trading in Resident Evil for DS.
Oof.
Regret, getting rid of that. It was, I mean, the game's worth money now, which is not the point. The point is it was rare.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know that in general, and I sold it when I sold my DS, which, again, I also regret getting rid of.
Oh.
But there, oh man, what was the other one? It was in my brain and it's gone. You go. I got to think of the other one.
I have 2 regretful trades as well, but I did them both at the same time. I took my copies of the Toy Story game for Super Nintendo and Super Bomberman 2 to a store called Software Etc., which later became GameStop. I think GameStop eventually bought that whole chain out. But I think I sold them to Software Etc. for like $15 total. And this was probably in like 1999. So it was like after the N64 came out, it was like pretty late in the Super Nintendo lifespan. It really wasn't a thing anymore. And I got like $15 for it, and I regret it all the time. It was such a formative moment for me that I don't trade games in ever anymore. Like I just never do it because I'm so worried I will regret. I just don't do it.
Yeah, I don't either. And I remember my other one. Do you want to do yours or mine? You want to go back and forth?
No, do yours. I told you mine. Mine were the same at the same time.
Oh, they were the same at the same time. Yeah. I let a friend of my brother's borrow my Game Boy Color and Mario Golf, the RPG one.
That's the good one.
Color. It's the good one, and it never came back, and it was gone. And I'm super sad about it.
I let somebody borrow my copy of Metroid Prime 2 in high school, and they moved away, and that was very sad.
Hot bummers, but you know what? We're adults now. We can find more copies of those games if we really try. I believe in us.
That's true.
Here, Chris goes on to the end of the email. He says, "That's all I've got for y'all this time, but if it's allowed, I'd love to make a shout out to a great little game store chain only here in Southeast Virginia. They are called Old School Games, and it's SKOOL. And they are the dopest little shop. They buy, sell, trade everything from newest consoles and games all the way back to Atari, Game Boy, and ColecoVision.
Wow.
They have all sorts of other classic game accessories too, like authentic DDR pads, Game Boy link cables, and Game Sharks. I love a good Game Shark. I personally bought my N64 and NES from them, as well as the classic Legend of Zelda Gold cartridge and the first Metal Gear. Only to name a small few. Thanks again, you guys, for the awesome podcast. Stay safe. And then he's got a thumbs up snake emoji, which is good.
I love it.
But also, that's a great shot. Old School Games, SKOOL. You got to support your local game store. There's one in Seattle called Game Gurus that I really like, which granted has been closed for 3 months now. Yeah. But still,
there's since we're shouting out old game companies or stores, there's one in Richland, Washington, where I'm from, called Sunken Treasures Games. That is wonderful.
That's a great name for a game
great,
store.
And they are very nice people, and I love shopping there when I'm in town.
Yeah. Old School Games, Southeast Virginia. Check it out, everybody. That's it for today, though, I think.
Yeah, that's all. We did it. We got through SimCity.
We did it. Everyone should email us your experiences. What did you do to play SimCity? Did you blow your town up? What did you do? Tell me all about it. I want to know. And with that, I think that's it for the episode today. You want to say bye to everybody, Tyler?
Yeah, bye to everybody.